Welcome to today's webinar in the Knowledge Mile series, part of the Lord Mayor's lectures on behalf of Alderman Professor Michael Manelli, whose theme for his mayoral year is Connect to Prosper. In this free online lecture series, we address the connections in and around the square mile, what Michael likes to call the world's coffee house, and how these might help us to tackle future global challenges. I'm Professor Tim Connell, an Emeritus Professor at City St George's, University of London, as it's called now. I'm also Chairman of the Gresham Society and a Fellow of Gresham College here in the City of London, and I'm a liveryman of the Stationers' Company. I'll be convening today's session and handling the questions and answers afterwards. Do please send your questions in, they're usually very enjoyable. So we've got a simple plan for today, very brief introduction from myself. We then go to the keynote presentation from Professor Simon Rogerson, and we have about 20 minutes for questions afterwards. Now, today we have a really good topic, ethical digital technology. Is it fact or fiction? And I'm delighted to welcome Professor Simon Rogerson from De Montfort University. He's highly expert in the matter of ethics and computing, as he was actually the first professor in Europe to hold a chair in computer ethics, and that was way back in 1998. So, Simon, firstly, can you tell us something about yourself?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Tim. My background is in computer science. I spent quite a lot of time in industry building systems, and then changed careers during a government push to get people who did IT into academia to try and make it more practical. And from that, I got interested in why systems fail, and then I ended up setting up a research centre for computing and social responsibility, which is basically interdisciplinary, so that technology can be properly grounded across all the disciplines, and hopefully it makes it a better offering for the world at large. So I'm now retired, but I still do lots of things.
Well, from what we were talking about before, I think you sound extremely unretired, but there we are. So can you tell us more about ethical digital technology, and is it really fact or fiction? Over to you now.
Okay, thank you. Right. Just bear with me whilst I just get the right. Where are we? Okay, so as I said, I've been involved with digital technology for a long time, and the roots of digital technology run very deep, as indeed does our dependency on digital technology. In fact, virtually every aspect of our society is now dependent on digital technology, and without doubt that has great benefit, and that's undeniable. But there are also many dangers which we need to be aware of, and sometimes we don't seem to be aware of those things. Sometimes we've seen questionable and commercial and political imperatives which have been fueled by an accelerating evolution of digital technology. Much of these offerings and digital technology in general are unstoppable, and it's very difficult to reverse some technology which has been implemented and used across society. And then there are disasters that have been caused by what I term toxic technology, and that seems to be becoming the norm. And let me just give you 4 examples of this, which spans a 25-year, the last 25 years. And the first one, as we all know, that is the scandals at the post office with the Horizon system, which was faulty software, which the post office and Fujitsu were unwilling to actually accept, and that led to the wrongful conviction of so many postmasters and postmistresses. And that went on for a long time, and we can all see what's happening in terms of the investigation in that. And then in 2006, there was the desire by VW to make profit and to ensure that their profits were stable. And so they built the emissions software, which was designed to cheat the emissions testing, and so their vehicles would not come under great scrutiny. And then this year, in the last few months, we've seen two incidents of toxic technology. The first one is CrowdStrike, which you'll all be aware is currently under a US Congress hearing over the last few days, where they implemented or they did a faulty security software update, which caused the biggest IT outage ever, and certainly put up was an indication of how dependent and how vulnerable we are in society. And then the last one of this quartet is to do with the horrendous situation in Southport last month, where following the horrendous death of those children, we saw lots of riots, and there is lots of evidence to show that those riots were fueled and exacerbated by social media and generative AI. So here we have 4 examples of toxic technology, digital technology, which is basically out of control, and we're not looking at it properly. And that makes it clear that from these examples that digital technology lies within a very complex landscape, and it's vital that we actually understand and take into account that landscape and this context if we are going to actually realize ethical digital technology. And I'm not too sure how far we've gone along that path of understanding, and that is a complex environment, and this complexity is clearly illustrated by this Wordle, and it depicts the most important topics and concepts, and that I discussed in my book, Ethical Digital Technology in Practice. So this was a practical look at the world of digital technology and its impact on society. And if you just look at that Wordle, you can see the vast number of things that we need to think about when we're trying to introduce systems into our society and into our organizations. And so many of those are interrelated, so it becomes very, very complex to actually figure out how we're going to ensure we have acceptable digital technology in our society. And if we just have a look at a couple of examples of that, of those problems, and this is to do with the benefits and dangers which I mentioned earlier that exist with the implication on use of digital technology. First one is to do with smart technology and smart cities in particular, and the concept of and the use of smart cities and the development of smart cities is application driven and driven by commercial and potential and political imperatives. Why? Because the vast majority of people live in the urban areas, and so they're going to focus on the cities. And there are lots of ethical hotspots which relate to that implication, the implementation of smart technology into these urban environments: citizen privacy, technological dependency, disaster recovery, false positives and negatives, and if you think about to one of the toxic technology examples I gave, CrowdStrike is a particularly a good example of these ethical hotspots. When CrowdStrike problem happened, and with the outage of IT, how many bits of smart city technology that went under? The vast majority of them. So this is a real problem. But let me just talk about this one for a moment: the urban-rural divide. Now, in the forecasts for 2050 are that in the UK and the US, for example, we will only have 10% of the population of those countries in the rural areas, whereas the world at large, the forecast is that 31%, so that's nearly a third of the world's population, remains in the rural divide. Where do we put our emphasis in terms of putting technology? In the urban areas. So that means a third of people in the worldwide are going to become digital outcasts, and even in the UK, 10% of our rural our population are going to in effect become digital outcasts, because we spend far too much emphasis on the urban areas and forget about the rural areas. And that in my opinion is a problem. Then the other example is to do with drones, and there's a dichotomy, because drones can be used for a whole variety of things. They can be an instrument of safety in particularly hazardous environments, whether they are industrial or if they are to do with, say, the police wanting to move into dangerous areas, and they use drones first of all to investigate what to do. So drones can be used as an instrument of safety, but they can also be used as instruments of suppression, surveillance, and attack. And so we need to be aware of that and think about clearly how we should use that, how we should control the use of technology. So simply, digital technology can add value to life, but it can also take value away from life. And what is clear is from this is that there is a dual use to do with digital technology, and the breadth and depth of reach of dual use is phenomenal. It's this which makes, I think, digital technology so ethically challenging, and it really points to the fact that digital technology must sit on a robust foundation of ethics. And sadly, in quite a lot of cases, that is not considered. And there are two aspects to this. The first one, there's process and product. So process is on this side, and this is to do with duty, whereas the product side is to do with outcome. And let me just explain what I mean by that. So process concerns the activities of practitioners, be they decision makers, developers, or indeed users, and whether their conduct is deemed to be virtuous. And so that's very much a deontological perspective, whereas process is concerns about the outcome of professional endeavor. Does the system that has been produced, is it deemed to be ethically viable? So that's a teleological perspective. And to be successful, I mean, that sounds quite theoretical, but and certainly, as I've said, we need to underpin digital technology with a robust ethics foundation. But it's more than just the theory. The theory bit, the sound philosophical underpinning is phronesis. But in order for this to be useful in the real world that we all live in, it needs to be practical. There needs to be practical application of this fundamental foundation. And so that is about praxis. So what we need to demonstrate is both praxis and phronesis. Practical application, sound underpinning with good theoretical analysis. And with this in mind, it's imperative that those who are committed to ethical digital technology engage and influence right across the digital technology landscape. They need to exert their moral compass politically, commercially, industrially, professionally, societally, and internationally. And that is a huge ask. And the question is how can this be achieved? And that's been the question for such a long time as digital technology evolves so quickly. Well, the first thing is that we need to accept and adjust to the fact that we are all technologists to a lesser or greater degree, and therefore there needs to be three perspectives. Yes, the academic analysis of and development enables us to actually produce new forms of digital technology, which is important, and professional practice and a lot of is equally important, so that those theoretical ideas and those developments and that research and development can be used in a good light. And we need to consider how we educate our future generations, and that must reflect this change to realize ethical digital technology. It's the fact that we must actually think about education, I think, in a different way. We need to review and, if necessary, challenge the conservative and conventional approaches to education related to ethical digital technology and society as a whole. And what is interesting is that, yes, academia, people working in academia, people actually working in professional practice are important. But as the technology actually evolves and becomes more and more pervasive, the thing which is most important in terms of the future is probably everyone's engagement in this dialogue. And up to date, the idea of actually getting everybody involved in understanding what is ethical digital technology and how can we achieve it, it's everyone's engagement which has had the least emphasis. And we need to think about that, and to actually do that, I think we need a number of new ideas to think that through. One of the things which I think is that there is a huge potential to use the creative arts to engage everyone in the ethical digital technology dialogue. In my book, Imagine Ethical Digital Technology for Everyone, I link science and technology with the creative arts using pictures, poems, stories, and quotations, and it seems to resonate with the wider population rather than simply academia and practitioners developing digital technology. And across the lifelong learning partnership, the thing where I think it is most important to think about that change in education, to question convention, and and be more creative. Don't know why I did that. There we go. Let's do this. It is this area, primary and secondary education, because that is if we can actually engage with the children of our society in a way that they understand about the pluses and minuses of digital technology, then the whole idea of actually ensuring a commitment to ethical digital technology, that becomes second nature. And this is where I think the creative arts has particular potential. And certainly I've tried some of these ideas across those two sections, and the idea to actually promote reflection and imagination, it is done through the idea of using the creative arts so that people can challenge, question, and indeed rather challenge and question problematic digital technology whilst championing and supporting stuff which is good for society. And I've used these sorts of ideas across the primary and secondary education, and it seems to work. And in fact, I've used it right across that lifelong learning partnership. So poems, for example, are a wonderful way to explore issues and make observations. Now, let me just give you an example of that with a simple list poem, which is about observation. Ethical ignorance, ethical naivety, ethical apathy, ethical blind spots, ethical hotspots, ethical awakening, ethical awareness, ethical journey, ethical inclusion, ethical destination, ethical digital technology. And this list poem tracks the journey from ethical ignorance right the way through to ethical achievement. And it demonstrates how we all need to think about these things. We need to be part of this dialogue. We need to accept that we all have responsibilities and obligations to realize ethical digital technology. And so the question was, ethical digital technology, fact or fiction? And I think the jury's out. I do not know which way this journey is going to go. Fiction, if we remain with a bandwagon culture where reactive actions attempt to fix digital technology catastrophes. Fact, if we reimagine education to give people a voice, we are proactive to explore digital technology's dual use potential, and we take time to analyze this potential and map out an ethical course of action. That requires fundamental change, I think, in political and commercial mindsets. And that is the challenge, I think, which faces us as we move more and more towards a society which is totally dependent on digital technology. You've only got to look at what's happening with AI now, and that is becoming a reality. Thank you very much.
Gosh, well, that was all very, very hard-hitting stuff. My goodness. Fact or fiction, positive or negative? Simon, how do you actually feel? This is very much your professional area, and you're one of the lead people very much at the beginning. Are you pessimistic or optimistic about the way these things are moving?
I have become increasingly optimistic, and the reason for that is because we have seen we're starting to see public outcry when things go wrong, and I think that at the moment there are two. Well, there's probably one thing why that is, and that's because people are becoming more dependent on technology, and so their everyday lives are becoming problematic if things go wrong, and so there is outcry, and what we're seeing is as you get more and more public outcry, then people such as politicians become more and more aware of that public outcry, and they then feel that they need to do something about it. And so the more there is a public voice, the more I think we are going to get a situation where we do stop and think, is this a good thing to do in terms of technology, or should we put some constraints in it? In the last 12 months since ChatGPT took place, was launched, there's been a growing bandwagon where everybody is saying AI is the solution to everything, which is rubbish, in my opinion, and it is going far too fast. It is going far, far too fast. We need to slow down. We need to think about these things. We need to very carefully analyze what the implications are. And there's, 12 months ago, there was the Bletchley summit where there was a lot of talking, but talking, political chat, is no use. You need action, not just words.
I don't want to hog all the questions, but this is very interesting stuff. What is your view of regulation? Can you actually regulate cyberspace? And if so, who can do it?
Well, cyberspace is a global activity. So what you can do as a well, in fact, and if you look at the European Union, that there are regulations in place which stop certain things happening there. But in order to actually really thoroughly regulate cyberspace, that requires global regulation, which I think is impossible. So the only thing you can do is regulate your own particular areas. But the problem with that is that those who want to do unacceptable activities, and there are lots of bright people out there who are immoral and are very clued up, very clever technicians. They will move to countries where there is no legislation, and they will then seep into our own lives, and that is very difficult. So there needs to be, we need to be very wary of this, and we need to put as much legislation as we can. And I guess a good example of where legislation that has across the world has improved in recent years is the legislation related to privacy. Although there are differences, but we have got a reasonable regulations related to data privacy. There are still lots of things to do, but it is certainly better than it was.
Right now, to be fair to all of our viewers, onto the questions. Very serious one from Jane Wortleyton. To her great credit, she's a volunteer with the Samaritans, and she senses that serious mental health problems are increasing to epidemic proportions in our society, as seems to be borne out by measurable data. So she has two questions. Do you think that rapidly advancing digital technology is a major contributor to mental health problems in our society? That's the first one.
Well, I can see that there are problems. I mean, if you just look at some of the way that, for example, gaming and gambling online are set up, they are designed to actually draw you in using subliminal effects, so that you become addicted with those things. Now, as soon as you become addicted to certain things like that, then I think there is a likelihood that will actually add to the potential for people to have mental problems. So there are clearly certain things like that, and I mean it is interesting because during the pandemic, I mean you could I mean there is certainly evidence in terms of people were using the technology, who had the technology, to actually stay in touch with people, which helped their mental stability. But on the other hand, because there was a digital divide, there were those who were isolated, totally isolated, and so their mental capacity may well have been affected. The fact that they were digital outcasts rather than digital natives. So I mean, I think the question shows great insight, and there is no simple answer to that. And it goes back to what I was saying, that what we need to do is we need to take time to think about the impact of implementation of digital technology. And the problem is commercial imperatives want to do things as quickly as possible, because that commercial imperative is to make profit, and so they will enter into a situation where they will, well, I call it tick box compliance. So yes, we've looked at these issues, and now we're moving on, and we're going to implement those. So we need to we need to take our time, and that requires us all to take our time, which is why we need that voice, and because the idea of digital technology causing mental health issues, I think, is abhorrent, and anybody who's working in the industry who doesn't subscribe to that shouldn't be working in the industry, because they're not being professional, because they haven't got a moral imperative.
I think you might have answered her second question, but just to record it, do you think digital technology can help our society to find solutions to these problems and thus help improve mental health in our society? Is there an upside to this?
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's really interesting, because I think an interesting dialogue between the technologists and the clinicians who are involved in mental health may well end up with a situation where you can start to look at facilities in digital technology which would actually help people. For example, there are some people who are very introvert and can't communicate with other humans, and that may cause mental health problems. Now, it may well be that you could actually produce something which enables people to interact with some technology, which then encourages them to actually interact with humans, which may then reduce the probability or the possibility of mental health issues. So I think it's, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier, right at the beginning, when I said I got involved with I started to get involved with other disciplines, because to actually do technology correctly, you have to do it in interdisciplinary manner. And any technologist who thinks that is not the case is wrong. And so the idea of, sorry?
So that's an important point for people to take away.
Yeah, because then if doctors talk to technologists, how can we use the technology to address some of the mental health issues? There may well be a really interesting conversation takes place, which leads to something which is really positive for us all.
Now, Dan Feeney asking, going back to the question of regulators, as big techs embrace the brave new world of AI, can regulators even keep up with the exponential and uncertain pace of change?
Okay, and the answer to that is, the simple answer to that is no, and it's all to do with misalignment of timescales. So, okay, so you get technology, and technology moves on really quickly, and so by the time you've got your regulation in place, because you've got all this talking, and you've got to put it through whatever regulatory body you've got, you end up with a piece of regulation or governance in place. But by the time you've done that, it's addressing, let's say, generation 1 of whatever this technology is. By the time you've got it in place, you're probably up to generation 5. So that regulation may not, if it's been done badly, may well not be appropriate for generation 5, but great for generation 1. Which is why I go back to what I said, that the fundamental thing we need is a foundation of robust ethics, because the thing which can actually make this better is for all of us to understand, and so we in effect self-regulate, because we take this moral compass, and eventually some legislation can be put in place, because you need legislation. Fundamentally, you need legislation, I think, in terms of digital technology, to have some mechanism to actually punish miscreants, but not to actually. It doesn't help, I don't think, a great deal in terms of pushing us down the right channel in terms of making socially acceptable digital technology. I think it is for us all to do that.
Right. Right, your first piece of fan mail from Nikki Holzhausen. Thank you for your most valuable and practical suggestions. Please may we have your thoughts on the developments in the EU regarding the guidelines on ethics in artificial intelligence. So this is guidelines rather more than legislation.
Yeah. I've had a brief look at that, and there are some things in there which I think are really useful, because if you look at those guidelines, I mean, there's a lot being written in terms of if like, I was talking about process and product, these two ideas. I mean, and fundamentally, a lot of those guidelines address the issue of process. So how you go about what sorts of things how you go about developing AI, what sorts of things you should be thinking about, how does it impact on different groups, or what the application area that you're trying to use AI to, and can you actually develop things which have got the proper checks and balances. So whilst we might be critical of any guidance like that, the fact that some guidance is coming out and it seems to have some reasonable practical ways of doing things, then we should welcome that, and we should move forward and say yes, and if it's yes but, then we can actually enhance that. So I think the idea of actually getting those guidelines out, because I think they came out in, was it 2000, was the first draft of it 2018. It was quite some time ago, so I think that is important, and it goes back to what I was saying. The regulation is too late. It is our actions which are things that make the difference.
Right. Now, Julia George, like many of us, has found this lecture very thought-provoking. Now, she says that you're proposing the use of reflection and imagination through creative arts at the primary and secondary education levels. Now, to marry this with straightforward technology education needs a fundamental change to how computing is taught, and currently she thinks it is hardly taught. How do you propose we achieve this?
Okay. Well, I can give you an example of how it can be done. I was invited to go into a secondary school here where I live, to explore with the computer science students who are doing a GCSE the issues, the broader issues related to technology. And so the first thing I did was I showed them a little animation about data shadows, which I had created, which is on YouTube, and they were intrigued by this little sort of cartoon, and then started talking. And so I opened up the discussion and basically acted as a catalyst, and they started arguing between themselves as to how we should think about data shadows, and the data we put on social media, and then so there are lots of ways you can do this. If you take a very different view in terms of computer studies in schools, about doing the technology, it is about what I said in my talk. It's about the landscape. And so what I did when I went into this classroom was to actually explore the landscape, and it was really interesting. And a few years ago, I did a similar thing via Skype with some students in Portugal, talking about Skype, and none of them had actually looked at the regulations to do with Skype. And I did a similar thing with my local school and said, have you looked at the terms and conditions? And I explained to them how they could actually then become their data shadows were there unless they opted out, which under European legislation is illegal, because the European legislation is opt-in as opposed to opt-out, because that is GDPR. But a lot of these systems don't work within the European Union, and therefore they offer the platforms outside. So hence, going back to the regulation things, there's some problems there in terms of how you do that. So yeah, we have to change. We have to change the education of our youngsters, and that requires a mind shift. So everybody who's listening out here, who's involved in education, start acting and get your voice going, so we can change this and for the better.
That's very good advice. Now, Richard Williams is giving us a nice hard-hitting one here. It's often said that nothing is as good or as bad as it first seems. Tech and digital endlessly overpromise and underdeliver, like AI, but we do seem to have sleepwalked into a position where tech power is concentrated in fewer and fewer hands with little or no accountability and little, if any, ethics. So how do we reclaim our ownership of the digital commons from these robber barons? So where is Robin Hood in all this?
Well, I mean, I think that's a really good observation, which I would wholeheartedly align with. Well, it's very interesting because the one thing that seems to happen in society regarding technology is everybody is well, not everybody, but the robber barons as the person. What? Sorry, I didn't catch his name.
Yeah, Richard Williams.
Richard mentioned the one thing that so we buy into all this stuff, and it's only at an event, when an event occurs, that suddenly people wake up and start to do something, which is what you end up with reactive stuff. Now, and that happened in lots of places. I mean, in terms of advances, I mean, I go back a long time when hijacking of planes was prevalent, and the hijacking of planes actually was the event which actually caused video conferencing to take place, because the Americans wouldn't actually fly into Europe, and so video conferencing suddenly became the norm, and hence today, you know, the many generations on, we're doing this webinar, and that was actually fueled by in effect, I never thought of this before, but this has been fueled by the hijacking back in the 70s and 70s. So there you go. But I think the way you can actually do this, and it is about the voice of everyone, because the greater the voices of everyone, and we've seen some technologies to put on hold. I mean, prime example of that is if you think about what happened in California regarding AI use in cars, driverless cars, real problems, people crashes, people damaged, and the voice of the Californian people, along with the police authorities, removed those driverless taxis from that Californian town. I can't remember which one it was now. Was it San Francisco? Well, whichever one it was, but it's in California. So and it was a voice which actually caused that to happen. And so it's difficult, without doubt, you know, because a lot of this stuff is irreversible. So you have to stop and think about the stuff before you actually implement, and that's where the voice is required, I think.
Right, well, you had a yin and yang symbol for drones. We've got a yin and yang for education here. Julia George says, thank you. I think we need teachers like you. Isabel Freighter says, do you think it would be a good practice to really let children use AI?
I think it is good practice to actually demonstrate to youngsters the positives and negatives of technology. Now, in order to do that, then I think it's good practice to actually perhaps give them access to simple AI, but in a controlled environment, so they can understand what the dangers are. And you can actually build shells to actually do scenarios which shows you what happens if in terms of the dangers, you know, and you can do a whole variety of things. And generative AI is a good example of that. You can use some of the current generative AI packages to demonstrate the positives and negatives, which is quite interesting. I mean, I'll give you an example, which is a bit weird, but this was at a conference recently, and I decided I wanted to demonstrate the the problems of AI. So I got one of the generative AI systems to write a dialogue between myself and Aristotle, and it produced this absolutely incredible story. And I and a colleague then played it out as if we'd written it, and everybody thought we were very clever. And then I explained to them that actually it wasn't me, it was a generative AI program which had produced this absolutely incredible story. And then there was a big debate about the issues related to that. So you can do things with children, I mean, if you pick something like that which was appropriate to them, in terms of, I don't know, primary schools, a conversation between a school child and Stitch, which is a little cartoon character, and you could play that out, and you could demonstrate the problems of it and the positives and the negatives and get them to think about that. So there we go.
Perhaps we can ask ChatGPT to do a Shakespearean sonnet about ethics and AI. Now, unfortunately,
you can do that.
I know, that's what worries me. A final message from your friend and colleague Ian Harris, because he wasn't able to stick around for the Q&A, but he would like to pass on his profound thanks to you for delivering this excellent webinar, not least because apparently he was the one who tapped you up to do this when he saw you a few months ago. So thank you.
Indeed, he was.
All of us. So I'm afraid that's all the time we have for questions, but it's worth mentioning that if you've enjoyed this session, then you might like to watch some of our other lectures on the topic of AI. On September the 10th, we had one by Matthew May. We had one about AI in museums on the 5th of September from John Meggitt. And on the 6th of November, Laura Lewington will be speaking about AI and health. So it is a topic which recurs in this series. Now, other things coming up. Very hard-hitting lecture coming up next week on restoring public trust in the police response to rape. We have a very informative session coming up, very interesting one about the Old Bailey, where there's far more than meets the eye, and how it became the most famous court in the world, given by one of the judges. And the 15th of October, again, very current topic about humanitarian surgery in Gaza, 14 years in war and what might be called peace. So, first of all, thank you very much to the audience for coming in and viewing. Some very good questions. I'm sorry we couldn't take them all. And of course, thank you very much to Professor Simon Rogerson from De Montfort University. I have to say, I love the slides. I'd expect no less from the dyed-in-the-wool techie, of course. But I did like your little clips, like decide, design, deliver, and drone dichotomy. I'm going to take one or two of those little phrases out for future use myself. Sorry about that. And I did like your new digital pen. I can reveal to the audience this is because you have a new laptop. But there we are. This lecture, all our lectures are recorded and posted on the Gresham Society website and on our YouTube channel in case you'd like to revisit anything, including the questions and answers. And we hope to see you all again in the near future for another lecture in the Knowledge Mile series. And don't forget that Michael Manelli's theme for the mayoral year is Connect to Prosper. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, Tim.